Previously on the advent of cyber. Santa is looking to hire new staff for his security team and has hired a freelance developer to create a web application where potential candidates can upload their CVs. Alf McSkitty is aware that third-party risk can be serious and has tasked you, Alf Exploit McRed, with testing the application before it goes live. Since the festivities are right around the corner, we will focus on the core feature of the website, namely the ability to upload a CV. And then I'm going to hit return, and hopefully that should create a payload and shouldn't take too long. We are going to change the listening port to 1337, and then we're going to set the local host to the IP address that we had earlier, so that's 10.10.166.207. You can see we have the CV-username.exe, so we're just going to open that, and then we're going to click upload, and we have an interpreter shell. Hello world, and welcome to Hacks. We are back with day 16 of TryHackMe's Advent of Cyber. It looks like we're doing another secure coding room, and it appears the topic of this room is SQL injection. Unfortunately, I am still feeling under the weather, so we're going to try and make this quick. I also did go out last night to see a bunch of Christmas lights, and I can say it was a mistake, but it was pretty awesome. The lights were fantastic. But without any further ado, the story. Set to have all their apps secured, the elves turn towards the one Santa uses to manage the present deliveries for Christmas. Alf McSkitty asked Alf Exploit and Alf Admin to assist you in clearing the application from SQL injections. When presented with the app's code, both elves looked a bit shocked as none of them knew how to make any sense of it, let alone fix it. "We used to have Alf McCode, but he funded a startup and helps us no more," said Alf Admin. After a bit of talk, it was decided. The elves returned carrying a pointy hat and appointed you the new Alf McCode. Congratulations on your promotion. So I deployed the Kali Linux attack box and the target of today's labs, but let's quickly talk about SQL and what it is. So SQL is structured query language, and it's a language for talking to databases and retrieving information. As you can see there, everything is done so in tables. You have columns in the table, and each column contains rows which contains data. And the basic syntax is as follows. So if you want to select all data from the table toys, you would just do select asterisk from toys with a semicolon on the end, but then you can get more refined and you can select name and quantity, which is going to be the individual columns from toys with a semicolon. And then if you want to add on more filters where you want a value of a particular column to be greater or equal than 20, you can just do select name quantity from toys where quantity is greater than or equal to 20. So that's the basics of SQL, but how do web applications interact with a database? Well, they need to use another language like PHP, Hypertext Preprocessor, or ASP, which I think is Active Server Pages, in order to produce statements and connect to the database. And you can see below we have an example of a PHP script that's interacting with a database. You can see that the server is the database host, so that'll be the IP address of the database, or if it's local, it'll be localhost. You have the user that you're authenticating with to the database, so this would be a user in the MySQL database. You have the password, which is the user's password, and then you have the schema, which is going to be the database name. So in the case of the one above, it would be toys. And then you can see you've got the connection string, where it's db equals mysqli connect, which is a PHP magic. And then you have the server, the user, the password, the schema, and that's just telling it to connect to the database. Then further down in the PHP script, you would have the SQL query where it's selecting the contents from the database to be displayed on the web application. And you can see the query is going to be select all from users where the user ID or the ID in the database equals 1. And then the results for this query are stored into this variable elves_rs. But unfortunately, this is not a safe way to do SQL queries, as the user can append anything to the ID and then that will get executed as part of the query, which could return some information that they're not supposed to be able to access. And we've been given a dynamic website in order to trial this out and see what we can get. One of the first things I look for when looking for SQL injection is I come up to the ID parameter, and I will usually put like a single quotation mark and hit return and see if you get an error, and usually that breaks the syntax, and you can see there, error, invalid SQL query, select all from users. So it's actually telling you what the complete query is there. But if we actually give the ID parameter a legitimate value like 1, you got Santa Claus, 2 is going to be Alf McSkiddy, 3 will probably be one of the elves, yep, 4, and so on and so forth. And the reason why this is happening is because of the way that the query is being structured. We're manipulating the query ourselves, so by changing the ID value, we're changing the parameter that gets passed to the SQL query. So when it queries the database, instead of looking for ID equals 1 or ID equals 2, it will look for the value that we're giving it. And when you have the ability to concatenate your own SQL syntax onto the existing syntax, that's where bad things can happen. And we've got this query here which is going to pull the usernames and passwords from the users table. So if we grab that, pop that into our clipboard, copy that out and paste it at the top and hit return, you can see that we get all the usernames and passwords. So you got Santa, ho ho ho, Alf McSkiddy. And to explain what's going on here is you have the ID parameter again, and then this union select command is being appended to the existing SQL query and being executed, and it's saying select null null username password null 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 from users. So that's selecting the username and password from the users table and putting that data into the 2 columns that already exist. These null are for other columns in the database that we're not going to use. So for instance, you have like a column for the images. We're not going to use that for data because it won't support data. If we tried to put username into, say, this column here, we wouldn't get any information back. If we tried to put the username into the next column, we would just get all the usernames down there. However, if we took one of the nulls away, the syntax would no longer be valid because it doesn't know how many columns, well, it's not using the correct amount of columns, and that should result in an error. So by using null, all databases support the null format, and to do an SQL injection, you need to have the right number of columns. So to be able to successfully perform an SQL injection, you first need to work out the number of columns before you can inject the data. And it's pretty good to actually practice doing this. So if we just did null null first of all, select null from users, we get an SQL error, and then we can do null null. And then if we keep increasing our null value, and another null, and another null, and another null, and another null, we eventually get a query that works because we've selected the right amount of columns. And then that's when we can start manipulating the different columns to retrieve the actual information that we want. And now it's time to fix these SQL injection vulnerabilities. So we've been given a URL here, and we just need to jump over into our browser, paste that in to the clipboard, and we can log in with coder. And then we're given what looks to be a code editor and a message at the bottom. We get a message from Alpha Exploit saying they will assist us for looking for existing SQL vulnerabilities in the application. Hopefully this will help you pinpoint the vulnerabilities in the code. And Alpha Admin is also in the chat, and he'll check the website is working as expected. Not that he thinks we're going to break it, but better safe than sorry. And then we have a thing at the bottom where we can just run checks and it will find all the vulnerabilities. So after running the checks, we're told that there is a vulnerability on alf.php that allows SQL injection to retrieve specific alf records. So we can see with this alf.php. Fortunately, we have some code that can fix that provided to us by TryHackMe. As you can see, we have the initial query, which is select all from users where ID equals get ID. That's going to take everything and concatenate it to the query, so you could put text in there. What we want to do is we want to narrow it down so that you can only specify a integer. By allowing only integers, you ensure things like select, all, union, words, strings can't be put in the parameter because it's expecting an integer. So we're just going to take this query equals select all, and instead of ID equals get, it's doing ID equals .int val get. I'm going to pop that in instead. So we have replaced line 4, and then what we need to do is Control S to save and then run checks again. We have successfully patched the alf.php, so it's no longer complaining about being able to get specific alf records, although I don't think that would patch it because you can still put in integers to get different alf records. So now we're looking at a new vulnerability on alf.php. Take a look at the following URL, alf.php, and it's doing the union select, and it's able to return the number 31337 as the first toy name. The website is still working fine, so we need to fix this. Now, the reason this vulnerability occurs is because we're doing a very similar statement below. As you can see there, we've got the ID int val get, so we just need to look at line 17 and do exactly the same. So we're going to do int val, open parentheses, and then close bracket, semicolon, then control S that. Then if we run checks again, oh yeah, it says file saved there, we get our first flag. Unfortunately, it seems they found another vulnerability on search toys.php, so we're just going to head over there. So it looks like this query is doing a select all from toys where name is getQ or description is getQ, and Q can be anything that the user submits, so it's like a search function. And this is bad because the user could just input any type of SQL query into this and it will get appended to the SQL query, which would allow them to retrieve usernames and passwords. And the way we're going to fix this is by using the prepared statement. Prepared statements allow you to separate the syntax of an SQL sentence from the actual parameters used on your where clause. Instead of building a single string by concatenation, you will first describe the structure of your SQL query and use placeholders to indicate the position of your query parameters. You will then bind the parameters to the prepared statement in the separate call function. So as you can see from the image above, what we're doing instead is we're using placeholders instead of allowing the user to interact directly with the statement, and it's using MySQL prepare instead of MySQL query. And you can see in this statement here that we're doing select from toys, and we're using question marks as placeholders instead of letting the user directly interact with the query, and we're using MySQL prepare instead of MySQL query. Next, we need to write a bit of script that handles the query and handles what the user's inputting. Now for strings, we use the values s. And because there's two strings or two placeholders, in this case we'll have to use ss, which you can see there. And for this we're using MySQL start bind parameter. I wish I was more of a developer so I could explain this better, but I hope this sort of makes sense. You're getting a query and then you're using these to replace the question marks, and these could be things like integers, which you would use an I for, or D for floats. And then finally we need a way to execute it, and so you have MySQL statement execute, and then once the statement has been executed we can retrieve the corresponding result using MySQL statement get result, passing the statement as the parameter only, and then they're assigned to the variable toys rs or toys rs, and you can see you have the entire code below. So if we grab that and head over to here, I believe we replace these two lines here, not with the flag, but with the actual statement. And hopefully this will work. Control save that, and then we're going to scroll down and click run checks, and we get our flag 2. Unfortunately, it seems we still have some vulnerabilities left to fix. One of the elf says I can inject SQL to force the database into returning Evan Noel as one of the receivers of an animal farm. I assume that's a toy, even if Evan didn't get enough good boy score to get that present. Geez, doesn't this feel like a social scoring system for Santa? You can access it here and see what I mean. So if we open that link there, you can see animal farm, alpha exploit red, and that Evan Noel is showing up as a planned delivery even though he's only got 2 out of 10. If you access the regular Animal Farm link, you'll see that Evan is not one of the receivers. It's Kate Clark. Yeah, she scored enough points. Evan didn't. Evan's a loser. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over to the code and we're going to have a look. So it's in toy.php, and you can see we're doing a similar sort of query as we did in the first one. We're doing get ID, but we need to change it to int val if I recall correctly. So let's have a look. What do we do in alf.php? .int val, and then we put get in brackets. Okie dokie. So let's go toy.php, go to here, int val, open bracket, then before the semicolon we're going to close the bracket. Let's have a look for any others. Toys R Us, blah blah blah, that looks fine. Okay, I say it looks fine, honestly have no idea, but it looks like we got something here as well. Query select all from kids where assigned toy equals blah. So let's change this one as well. Let's do int val, open bracket, close bracket, control S to save, and then we're going to run and hopefully see what happens. So we got flag 1, flag 2, flag 3. We have are we secure yet? Okay, so there is one more vulnerability, and it says I can bypass the login screen at this URL with an SQL injection in the username. If you want to try it, just use the password with this as your username. So what this is doing is all 1 equals 1. 1 does equal 1, which is true. So we're saying even if the username and password is incorrect, if 1 equals 1, then log me in. This is pretty much the first SQL injection anybody will ever learn when they start learning SQL injection, and they do it in exams and things like that. It seems the login is sending the user and password via post, so you may want to search the full parameters sent using the post array instead of the get. Not that we know any coding at all. Yeah, I know how you feel. I know absolutely no coding. So we need to log into login.php, and you can see there's the post request there, and we can see the statement is here. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to just comment some stuff out. because this is bad. We don't want to do this. This isn't using a prepared statement, is it? So we're selecting all from username, and it's letting the user specify the username, whereas we want to change these to question marks so that our query looks a lot better. So I'm just going to copy that, and then after this one we're going to start rewriting this and hopefully fix it, but I'm a noob, so I don't know what I'm talking about. So we're going to get rid of all this, and we're going to say username equals question mark and password equals question mark, I think. Yeah, that looks good. And then we want to do a quotation mark, because obviously we're closing the statement. So next we want to head back to the lab and look for the prepared statements. So we had the full prepared statement down here. Fantastic. So I'm just going to grab that, pop that into my notepad. We'll probably get rid of half of this. Whoops. So we want to put that into our clipboard, grab all that, minimize that, and hopefully we can cannibalize this to make it our own. So we've already got the query, and you can see there's already the get, so we don't need those first two lines, but I'm just tidying this up a second. So we want to get rid of this line here and this line here because we already have those. MySQL statement, prepare DB query, fantastic. And now this is where we're specifying the placeholders. So we want to change the Q for username and the Q for password. Now MySQL statement execute, and then so we need to change this into a variable here, so we're just going to do users underscore rs, which has already been defined. MySQL statement get results, which is what we did earlier. Statement MySQL statement execute. I think that should be us good. If I try and run that, I might need to remove the comments depending on how it checks it. No, maybe it doesn't like the comments. Let's take those out a second. Nope, still doesn't like it. The code was fine, I forgot to save it. Anyway, that's the room now complete. If you struggled with the content of my video, come up to watch Insider PhD. Her video is at the top of the page, and she does a wonderful job of explaining it. She's really good and goes into a lot of detail and explains everything far better than I have in this video. I apologise for the low mic volume. It seems something has changed, although I've not changed any settings. Probably a Windows update which has done something with the microphone in the background, so the recording volume is lower. I'll get that fixed for the next video. And yeah, looking at the editing of this video, it's not great, so I apologise that it's not up to the caliber that you're used to. It's a bit longer as well, but yeah, I'm feeling unwell, so I'm gonna rest up, wait for the next one. Oh yeah, and sorry it's late. Anyway, I'm rambling. That's all I got for you today. Kind regards.